Alright, so now the big question is how to build the bronze layer. So first thing first, we do analyzing. As you are developing anything, you don't immediately start writing a code. So before we start coding the bronze layer, what we usually do is we have to understand the source system. So what I usually do, I make an interview with the source system experts and ask them many questions in order to understand the nature of the source system that I'm connecting to the data warehouse. And once you know the source systems, then we can start coding. And the main focus here is to do the data ingestion. So that means we have to find a way on how to load the data from the source into the data warehouse. So it's like we are building a bridge between the source and our target system, the data warehouse. And once we have the code ready, the next step is we have to do data validation. So here comes the quality control. It is very important in the bronze layer to check the data completeness. So that means we have to compare the number of records between the source system and the bronze layer, just to make sure we are not losing any data in between. And another check that we will be doing is the schema checks, and that's to make sure that the data is placed on the right position. And finally, we don't have to forget about documentation and committing our work in the Git. So this is the process that we're gonna follow to build the bronze layer. Alright my friends, so now before connecting any source systems to our data warehouse, we have to make a very important step is to understand the sources. So how I usually do it, I set up a meeting with the source systems experts in order to interview them, to ask them a lot of stuff about the source. And gaining this knowledge is very important because asking the right question will help you to design the correct scripts in order to extract the data and to avoid a lot of mistakes and challenges. And now I'm going to show you the most common questions that I usually ask before connecting anything. Okay, so we start first by understanding the business context and the ownership. So I would like to understand the story behind the data. I would like to understand who is responsible for the data, which IT departments and so on. And then it's nice to understand as well what business process it supports. Does it support the customer transactions, the supply chain, logistics, or maybe finance reporting? So with that, you're gonna understand the importance of your data. And then I ask about the system and data documentation. So having documentations from the source is your learning materials about your data, and it's gonna save you a lot of time later when you are working and designing maybe new data models. And as well, I would like always to understand the data model for the source system, and if they have like descriptions of the columns and the tables, it's gonna be nice to have the data catalog. This can help me a lot in the data warehouse, how I'm gonna go and join the tables together. So with that, you get a solid foundations about the business context, the processes, and the ownership of the data. And now in the next step, we're gonna start talking about the technicality. So I would like to understand the architecture and as well the technology stack. So the first question that I usually ask is how the source system is storing the data. Do we have the data on the on-prem like in SQL Server, Oracle, or is it in the cloud like Azure, AWS, and so on? And then once we understand that, then we can discuss what are the integration capabilities, like how I'm gonna go and get the data. Do the source system offer APIs, maybe Kafka, or they have only like file extractions, or they're gonna give you like a direct connection to the database. So once you understand the technology that you're gonna use in order to extract the data, then we're gonna deep dive into more technical questions. And here we can understand how to extract the data from the source system and then load it into the data warehouse. So the first thing that we have to discuss with the experts, can we do an incremental load or a full load? And then after that, we're gonna discuss the data scope, the historizations. Do we need all data? Do we need only maybe 10 years of the data? Are there histories already in the source system, or should we build it in the data warehouse, and so on? And then we're gonna go and discuss what is the expected size of the extracts. Are we talking here about megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes? And this is very important to understand whether we have the right tools and platform to connect the source system. And then I try to understand whether there are any data volume limitations. Like if you have some old source systems, they might struggle a lot with performance and so on. So if you have like an ETL that is extracting large amount of data, you might bring the performance down of the source system. So that's why you have to try to understand whether there are any limitations for your extracts, and as well other aspects that might impact the performance of the source system. This is very important. If they give you an access to the database, you have to be responsible that you are not bringing the performance of the database down. And of course, very important question is to ask about the authentication and the authorization. Like how are you going to go and access the data in the source system? Do you need an any tokens, keys, password, and so on. So those are the questions that you have to ask if you are connecting a new source system to the data warehouse. And once you have the answers for those questions, you can proceed with the next steps to connect the sources to the data warehouse. Alright my friends, so with that you have learned how to analyze new source systems that you want to connect to your data warehouse. So this step is done, and now we're gonna go back to coding, where we're gonna write scripts in order to do the data ingestion from the CSV files to the bronze layer. And let's have a quick look again to our bronze layer specifications. So we just have to load the data from the sources to the data warehouse. We're gonna build tables in the bronze layer. We are doing a full load. So that means we are truncating and then inserting the data. There will be no data transformations at all in the bronze layer. And as well, we will not be creating any data model. So this is the specifications of the bronze layer. Alright, now in order to create the DDL script for the bronze layer, creating the tables of the bronze, we have to understand the metadata, the structure, the schema of the incoming data. And here either you ask the technical experts from the source system about these informations, or you can go and explore the incoming data and try to define the structure of your tables. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna start with the first source system, the CRM. So let's go inside it, and we're gonna start with the first table, the customer info. Now if you open the file and check the data inside it, you see we have a header information, and that is very good because now we have the names of the columns that are coming from the source, and from the content you can define, of course, the data types. So let's go and do that. First we're going to say create table, and then we have to define the layer. It's going to be the bronze, and now very important, we have to follow the naming convention. So we start with the name of the source system. It is the CRM underscore, and then after that the table name from the source system. So it's going to be the cost underscore info. So this is the name of our first table in the bronze layer. And then the next step, we have to go and define, of course, the columns. And here again, the column names in the bronze layer are going to be one-to-one, exactly like the source system. So the first one going to be the ID, and I will go with the data type integer. Then the next one going to be the key in varchar, and the length I will go with 50. And the last one gonna be the create date. It's gonna be a date. So with that we have covered all the columns available from the source system. So let's go and check. And yes, the last one is the create date. So that's it for the first table. Now a semicolon, of course, at the end. Let's go and execute it. And now we're gonna go to the Object Explorer over here, refresh, and we can see the first table inside our data warehouse. Amazing, right? So now next what you have to do is to go and create a DDL statement for each file for those two systems. So for the CRM, we need 3 DDLs, and as well for the other system, the ERP, we have as well to create 3 DDLs for the 3 files. So at the end, we're gonna have in the bronze layer 6 tables, 6 DDLs. So now pause the video, go create those DDLs. I will be doing the same as well, and we will see you soon. Alright, so now I hope you have created all those details. I'm going to show you what I have just created. So the second table in the source CRM, we have the product informations, and the third one is the sales details. Then we go to the second system, and here we make sure that we are following the naming convention. So first the source system, ERB, and then the table name. So the second system was really easy. You can see we have only here like 2 columns, and for the customers like only 3, and for the categories only 4 columns. Alright, so after defining those stuff, of course we have to go and execute them. So let's go and do that. And then we go to the Object Explorer over here, refresh the tables, and with that you can see we have 6 empty tables in the bronze layer, and with that we have all the tables from the 2 source systems inside our database, but still we don't have any data. And you can see our naming convention is really nice. You see the first 3 tables comes from the CRM source system, and then the other 3 comes from the ERB. So we can see in the bronze layer the things are really splitted nicely, and you can identify quickly which table belonged to which source system. Now there is something else that I usually add to the DDL script, is to check whether the table exists before creating. So for example, let's say that you are renaming, or you would like to change the data type of specific field. If you just go and run this query, you will get an error because the database is gonna say we have already this table. So in other databases you can say create or replace table, but in the SQL server you have to go and build a TSQL logic. So it is very simple. First we have to go and check whether the object exists in the database. So we say if object ID, and then we have to go and specify the table name. So let's go and copy the whole thing over here and make sure you get exactly the same name as the table name. So there you see like space, I'm just gonna go and remove it. And then we're gonna go and define the object type. So it's gonna be the U. It stands for user. It is the user defined tables. So if this table is not null, so that means the database did find this object in the database. So what can happen? We say go and drop the table. So the whole thing again and semicolon. So again, if the table exists in the database is not null, then go and drop the table, and after that go and create it. So now if you go and highlight the whole thing and then execute it, it will be working. So first drop the table if it exists, then go and create the table from scratch. Now what you have to do is to go and add this check before creating any table inside our database. So it's gonna be the same thing for the next table and so on. I went and added all those checks for each table. And what can happen if I go and execute the whole thing? It's gonna work. So with that, I'm recreating all the tables in the bronze layer from the scratch. Now the methods that we're going to use in order to load the data from the source to the data warehouse is the bulk inserts. Bulk insert is a method of loading massive amount of data very quickly from files like CSV files or maybe a text file directly into a database. It is not like the classical normal inserts where it's going to go and insert the data row by row, but instead the bulk insert is one operation that's going to load all the data in one go into the database, and that's what makes it very fast. So let's go and use this method. Okay, so now let's start writing the script in order to load the first table in the source CRM. So we're gonna go and load the table customer info from the CSV file to the database table. So the syntax is very simple. We're gonna start with saying bulk insert. So with that, SQL understand we are doing not a normal insert, we are doing a bulk insert. And then we have to go and specify the table name. So it is bronze.crm cost info. So now we have to specify the full location of the file that we are trying to load in this table. So now what we have to do is to go and get the path where the file is stored. So I'm gonna go and copy the whole path and then add it to the bulk insert exactly like where the data exists. So for me it is in C SQL data warehouse project dataset in the source CRM, and then I have to specify the file name. So it's gonna be the cost_info.csv. You have to get it exactly like the path of your files, otherwise it will not be working. So after the path, now we come to the with clause. Now we have to tell the SQL server how to handle our file. So here comes the specifications. There is a lot of stuff that we can define. So let's start with the very important one is the row header. Now if you check the content of our files, you can see always the first row includes the header information of the file. So those informations are actually not the data, it's just the column names. The actual data starts from the second row and we have to tell the database about this information. So we're gonna say first row is actually the second row. So with that we are telling SQL to skip the first row in the file. We don't need to load those informations because we have already defined the structure of our table. So this is the first specifications. The next one, which is as well very important in loading any CSV file, is the separator between fields, the delimiter between fields. So here it really depends on the file structure that you are getting from the source. As you can see, all those values are splitted with a comma, and we call this comma as a file separator or a delimiter. And I saw a lot of different CSVs, like sometimes they use a semicolon or a pipe or a special character like a hash and so on. So you have to understand how the values are splitted, and in this file it's splitted by the comma, and we have to tell SQL about this info. It's very important. So we're gonna say field terminator, and then we're gonna say it is the comma. And basically those two informations are very important for SQL in order to be able to read your CSV file. Now there are like many different options that you can go and add. For example, tab lock. It is an option in order to improve the performance where you are locking the entire table during loading it. So as SQL is loading the data to this table, it's gonna go and lock the whole table. So that's it for now. I'm just gonna go and add the semicolon, and let's go and insert the data from the file inside our bronze table. Let's execute it. And now you can see SQL did insert around 80,000 rows inside our table. So it is working. We just loaded the file into our database, but now it is not enough to just write the script. script, you have to test the quality of your bronze table, especially if you are working with files. So let's go and just do a simple select. So from our new table, and let's run it. So now the first thing that I check is, do we have data like in each column? Well, yes, as you can see, we have data. And the second thing is, do we have the data in the correct column? This is very critical as you are loading the data from a file to a database. Do we have the data in the correct column? So for example, here we have the first name, which of course makes sense, and here we have the last name. But what could happen, and this mistakes happens a lot, is that you find the first name informations inside the key, and as well you see the last name inside the first name, and the status inside the last name. So there is like shifting of the data. And this data engineering mistake is very common if you are working with CSV files. And there are like different reasons why it happens. Maybe the definition of your table is wrong, or the field separator is wrong. Maybe it's not a comma, it's something else, or the separator is a bad separator, because sometimes maybe in the keys or in the first name there is a comma and the SQL is not able to split the data correctly. So the quality of the CSV file is not really good. And there are many different reasons why you are not getting the data in the correct column. But for now, everything looks fine for us. And the next step is that I go and count the rows inside this table. So let's go and select that. So we can see we have 18,493. And now what we can do, we can go to our CSV file and check how many rows do we have inside this file. And as you can see, we have 18,494. We are almost there. There is like one extra row inside the file, and that's because of the header. The first header information is not loaded inside our table, and that's why always in our tables we're gonna have one less row than the original files. So everything looks nice and we have done this step correctly. Now if I go and run it again, what's gonna happen? We will get duplicates inside the bronze layer. So now we have loaded the file like twice inside the same table, which is not really correct. The method that we have discussed is first to make the table empty and then load, truncate and then insert. In order to do that, before the bulk insert, what we're gonna do, we're gonna say truncate table, and then we're gonna have our table, and that's it with a semicolon. So now what we are doing is, first, we are making the table empty, and then we start loading from the scratch. We are loading the whole content of the file inside the table, and this is what we call full load. So now let's go and mark everything together and execute. And again, if you go and check the content of the table, you can see we have only 18,000 rows. Let's go and run it again. The count of the bronze layer, you can see we still have the 18,000. So each time you run this script now, we are refreshing the table customer info from the file into the database table. So we are refreshing the bronze layer table. So that means if there is like now any changes in the file, it will be loaded to the table. So this is how we do a full load in the bronze layer, by truncating the table and then doing the inserts. And now of course what we have to do is to pause the video and go and write the same script for all 6 files. So let's go and do that. Okay, back. So I hope that you have as well written all those scripts. So I have the 3 tables in order to load the first source system, and then 3 sections in order to load the second source system. And as I'm writing those scripts, make sure to have the correct path. So for the second source system, you have to go and change the path for the other folder. And as well, don't forget the table name on the bronze layer is different from the file name, because we start always with the source system name. With the files, we don't have that. So now I think I have everything is ready. So let's go and execute the whole thing. Perfect, awesome. So everything is working. Let me check the messages. So we can see from the message how many rows are inserted in each table. And now of course the task is to go through each table and check the content. So that means now we have really nice script in order to load the bronze layer. And we will use this script in daily basis. Every day we have to run it in order to get a new content to the data warehouse. And as we learned before, if you have like a script of SQL that is frequently used, what we can do, we can go and create a stored procedure from those scripts. So let's go and do that. It's going to be very simple. We're going to go over here and say create or alter procedure. And now we have to define the name of the stored procedure. I'm going to go and put it in the schema bronze because it belongs to the bronze layer. So then we're gonna go and follow the naming convention. The stored procedure starts with load underscore and then the bronze layer. So that's it about the name, and then very important, we have to define the begin and as well the end of our SQL statements. So here is the begin, and let's go to the end and say this is the end, and then let's go highlight everything in between and give it one push with tab. So with that, it is easier to read. So now next, what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and execute it. So let's go and create this stored procedure. And now if you want to go and check your stored procedure, you go to the database, and then we have here a folder called programmability, and then inside it we have stored procedure. So if you go and refresh, you will see our new stored procedure. Let's go and test it. So I'm gonna go and have a new query, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna say execute bronze.load bronze. So let's go and execute it, and with that we have just loaded completely the bronze layer. So as you can see, SQL did go and insert all the data from the files to the bronze layer. It is way easier than each time running those scripts, of course. Alright, so now the next step is that, as you can see, the output message, it is really not having a lot of informations. The message of your ETL stored procedure, it will not be really clear. So that's why if you are writing an ETL script, always take care of the messaging of your code. So let me show you a nice design. Let's go back to our stored procedure. So now what we can do, we can go and divide the message based on our code. So now we can start with the message, for example, over here, let's say print, and we say, what we are doing with this stored procedure, we are loading the bronze layer. So this is the main message, the most important one, and we can go and play with the separators like this. So we can say print, and now we can go and add some nice separators, like for example the equals at the start and at the end, just to have like a section. So this is just a nice message at the start. So now by looking to our code, we can see that our code is split into two sections. The first section, we are loading all the tables from the source system CRM, and the second section is loading the tables from the ERP. So we can split the prints by the source system. So let's go and do that. So we're gonna say print, and we're gonna say loading CRM tables. This is for the first section, and then we can go and add some nice separators like the one, let's take the minus, and of course don't forget to add semicolons like me. So we can have semicolon for each print. Same thing over here. I will go and copy the whole thing because we're gonna have it at the start and as well at the end. Let's go copy the whole thing for the second section. So for the ERP, it starts over here, and we're gonna have it like this, and we're gonna call it loading ERP. So with that, in the output, we can see nice separation between loading each source system. Now we go to the next step where we go and add like a print for each action. So for example, here we are truncating the table. So we say print, and now what we can do, we can go and add two arrows, and we say what we are doing. So we are truncating the table, and then we can go and add the table name in the message as well. So this is the first action that we are doing, and we can go and add another print for inserting the data. So we can say inserting data into, and then we have the table name. So with that, in the output, we can understand what SQL is doing. So let's go and repeat this for all other tables. Okay, so I just added all those prints, and don't forget the semicolon at the end. So I would say let's go and execute it and check the output. So let's go and do that, and then maybe at the start, just to have quick output, execute our stored procedure like this. So let's see. Now if you check the output, you can see things are more organized than before. So at the start we are reading, okay, we are loading the bronze layer. Now first we are loading the source system CRM, and then the second section is for the ERP, and we can see the actions. So we are truncating, inserting for each table, and as well the same thing for the second source. So as you can see, it is nice and cosmetic, but it's very important as you are debugging any errors. And speaking of errors, we have to go and handle the errors in our stored procedure. So let's go and do that. It's gonna be the first thing that we do. We say begin, try, and then we go to the end of our script, and we say before the last end, we say end try. And then the next thing, we have to add the catch. So we're gonna say begin, catch, and end catch. So now first, let's go and organize our code. I'm gonna take the whole code and give it one more push, and as well the begin try, so it is more organized. And as you know, the try and catch, SQL gonna go and execute the try, and if there is like any errors during executing this script, the second section gonna be executed. So the catch will be executed only if the SQL failed to run the try. So now what we have to do is to go and define for SQL what to do if there is like an error in your code. And here we can do multiple stuff like maybe creating a logging tables and add the messages inside this table, or we can go and add some nice messaging to the output. Like for example, we can go and add like a section again over here. So again, some equals, and we can go and repeat it over here and then add some content in between. So we can start with something like to say error occurred during loading bronze layer. And then we can go and add many stuff, like for example, we can go and add the error message. And here we can go and call the function error message. And we can go and add as well, for example, the error number. So error number. And of course, the output of this is going to be in number, but the error message here is a text. So we have to go and change the data type. So we're going to do a cast as in varchar, like this. And then there is like many functions that you can add to the output, like for example, the error state and so on. So you can design what can happen if there is an error in the ETL. Now, what else is very important in each ETL process is to add the duration of each step. So for example, I would like to understand how long it takes to load this table over here. But looking to the output, I don't have any information how long it's taking to load my tables. And this is very important because as you are building like a big data warehouse, the ETL process is going to take a long time and you would like to understand where is the issue, where is the bottleneck, which table is consuming a lot of time to be loaded. So that's why we have to add those informations as well to the output, or even maybe to protocol it in a table. So let's go and add as well this step. So we're going to go to the start. And now in order to calculate the duration, you need the starting time and the end time. So we have to understand when we started loaded and when we ended loading the table. So now the first thing is we have to go and declare the variables. So we're going to say declare, and then let's make one called start time. And the data type of this is going to be the date time. I need exactly the second when it started. And then another one for the end time. So another variable, end time, and as well the same thing, date time. So with that, we have declared the variables, and the next step is to go and use them. So now let's go to the first table, to the customer info, and at the start, we're going to say set start time equal to get date. So we will get the exact time when we start loading this table. And then let's go and copy the whole thing and go to the end of loading over here. So we're going to say set this time, the end time, equal as well to the get dates. So with that, now we have the values of when we start loading this table and when we completed loading the table. And now the next step is we have to go and print the duration, those informations. So over here, we can go and say print, and we can go and have as again the same design. So 2 arrows, and we can say very simply load duration, and then double points and a space. And now what we have to do is to calculate the duration, and we can do that using the date and time function dateDiff in order to find the interval between 2 dates. So we're going to say plus over here and then use dateDiff, and here we have to define 3 arguments. First one is the unit, so here you can define second, minute, hours, and so on. So we're going to go with the second, and then we're going to define the start of the interval. It's going to be the start time, and then the last argument is going to be the end of the boundary. It's going to be the end time. And now of course the output of this is going to be in number. That's why we have to go and cast it. So we're going to say cast as in varchar, and then we're going to close it like this, and maybe at the end we're going to say plus space seconds in order to have a nice message. So again, what we have done, we have declared the 2 variables and we are using them. At the start, we are getting the current date and time, and at the end of loading the table, we are getting the current date and time, and then we are finding the differences between them in order to get the load duration. And in this case, we are just printing this information. And now we can go, of course, and add some nice separator between each table. So I'm going to go and do it like this. Just few minuses, not a lot of stuff. So now what we have to do is to go and add this mechanism for each table in order to measure the speed of the ETL for each one of them. Okay, so now I have added all those configurations for each table, and let's go and run the whole thing now. So let's go and edit the stored procedure, this, and we're gonna go and run it. So let's go and execute. So now as you can see, we have here one more info about the load durations, and it is everywhere. I can see we have 0 seconds, and that's because it is super fast of loading those informations. We are doing everything locally at PC, so loading the data from files to database is gonna be mega fast. But of course, in real projects, you have like different servers and networking between them, and you have millions of rows in the tables. Of course, the duration gonna be not like 0 seconds. Things gonna be slower, and now you can see easily how long it takes to load each of your tables. And now, of course, what is very interesting is to understand how long it takes to load the whole bronze layer. So now your task is as well to print at the ends informations about the whole patch, how long it took to load the bronze layer. Okay, I hope we are done. Now I have done it like this. We have to define 2 new variables. So the start time of the batch and the end time of the batch. And the first step in the stored procedure is to get the date and time informations for the first variable. And exactly at the end, the last thing that we do in the stored procedure, we're gonna go and get the date and time informations for the end time. So we say again, set get date for the batch end time, and then all what you have to do is to go and print a message. So we are saying loading bronze layer is completed, and then we are printing total load duration, and the same thing with the date difference between the batch start time and the end time, and we are calculating the seconds and so on. So now what you have to do is to go and execute the whole thing. So let's go and refresh the definition of the stored procedure, and then let's go and execute it. So in the output, we have to go to the last message, and we can see loading bronze layer is completed, and the total load duration is as well 0 seconds, because the execution time is less than 1 second. So with that, you are getting now a feeling about how to build an ETL process. So as you can see, the data engineering is not all about how to load the data. It's how to engineer the whole pipeline, how to measure the speed of loading the data, what can happen if there is like an error, and to print each step in your ETL process and make everything organized and cleared in the output and maybe in the logging, just to make debugging and optimizing the performance way easier. And there is like a lot of things that we can add. We can add the quality measures and stuff. So we can add many stuff to our ETL scripts to make our data warehouse professional. Alright my friends, so with that we have developed a code in order to load the bronze layer, and we have tested that as well. And now in the next step we're gonna go back to Draw.io because we want to draw a diagram about the data flow. So let's go. So now what is a data flow diagram? We're gonna draw a simple visual in order to map the flow of your data, where it comes from and where it ends up. So we want just to make clear how the data flows through different layers of your projects, and that's helped us to create something called the data lineage. And this is really nice, especially if you are analyzing an issue. So if you have like multiple layers and you don't have a real data lineage or flow, it's gonna be really hard to analyze the scripts in order to understand the origin of the data. And having this diagram gonna improve the process of finding issues. So now let's go and create one. Okay, so now back to Draw.io, and we're gonna go and build the flow diagram. So we're gonna start first with the source system. So let's build the layer. I'm gonna go and remove the fill, dot it, and then we're gonna go and add like a box saying sources, and we're gonna put it over here, increase the size 24, and as well without any lines. Now what do we have inside the sources? We have like folder and files. So let's go and search for a folder icon. I'm gonna go and take this one over here and say you are the CRM. And we can as well increase the size. And we have another source. We have the ERP. Okay, so this is the first layer. Let's go and now have the bronze layer. So we're gonna go and grab another box, and we're gonna go and make the coloring like this, and instead of auto, maybe take the hatch, maybe something like this, whatever, you know. So rounded, and then we can go and put on top of it like the title. So we can say you are the bronze layer, and increase as well the size of the font. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna go and add boxes for each table that we have in the bronze layer. So for example, we have the sales details. We can go and make it a little bit smaller, maybe 16 and not bold. And we have other two tables from the CRM. We have the customer info and as well the product info. So those are the three tables that comes from the CRM. And now what we're going to do, we're going to go and connect now the source CRM with those three tables. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the folder and start making arrows from the folder to the bronze layer like this. And now we have to do the same thing for the ERP source. So as you can see, the data flow diagram shows us in one picture the data lineage between the two layers. So here we can see easily those three tables actually comes from the CRM, and as well those three tables in the bronze layer are coming from the ERP. I understand if we have like a lot of tables, it's gonna be a huge mess, but if you have like small or medium data warehouse, building those diagrams gonna make things really easier to understand how everything is flowing from the sources into the different layers in your data warehouse. Alright, so with that we have the first version of the data flow. So this step is done, and the final step is to commit our code in the Git repo. Okay, so now let's go and commit our work. Since it is scripts, we're gonna go to the folder scripts, and here we're gonna have like scripts for the bronze, silver and gold. That's why maybe it makes sense to create a folder for each layer. So let's go and start creating the bronze folder. So I'm gonna go and create a new file, and then I'm gonna say bronze / and then we can have the DDL script of the bronze layer .sql. So now I'm gonna go and paste the DDL codes that we have created, so those 6 tables. And as usual at the start we have a comment where we are explaining the purpose of this script. So we are saying this script creates tables in the bronze schema, and by running this script you are redefining the DDL structure of the bronze tables. So let's have it like that, and I'm gonna go and commit the changes. Alright, so now as you can see inside the scripts we have a folder called bronze, and inside it we have the DDL script for the bronze layer. And as well in the bronze layer we're gonna go and put our storage procedure. So we're gonna go and create a new file. Let's call it proc load bronze.sql, and then let's go and paste our script. And as usual I have put it at the start an explanation about the storage procedure. So we are saying this storage procedure gonna go and load the data from the CSV files into the bronze schema. So it's gonna go and truncate first the tables and then do a bulk insert. And about the parameters, this storage procedure does not accept any parameter or return any values. And here a quick example how to execute it. Alright, so I think I'm happy with that. So let's go and commit it. Alright my friends, so with that we have committed our code into the Git, and with that we are done building the bronze layer. So the whole epic is done. Now we're gonna go to the next one. This one gonna be more advanced than the bronze layer because there will be a lot of struggle with cleaning the data and so on. So we're gonna start with the first task where we're gonna analyze and explore the data in the source systems. So let's go. If you like this video and you want me to create more content like this, I'm gonna really appreciate it if you support the channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. All those stuff gonna help the channel with the YouTube algorithm, and as well my content gonna reach the others. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye.